Q&A Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @Q&A Review, that is @CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@QNreview.com. That is INFORMATION@CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from The National on Monday, 15th April 2024. From the Politics section. Scottish stars and celebrities urge government to act on Sudan. By Laura Pollock. Celebrities including Annie Lennox and Alan Cumming have signed an open letter to the Foreign Secretary calling for further action to stop the terrible war in Sudan that has now raged for a year. Actors Brian Cox, Cumming, Bill Nye and Will Poulter signed the letter to Lord David Cameron along with singers Lennox, Paloma Faith and Peter Gabriel. Film producer Barbara Broccoli, writer Candice Carty-Williams and historian and broadcaster David Olusoga also signed the letter. The Circle, a global feminist NGO non-governmental organisation founded by former Eurythmics singer Lennox, gathered the celebrity signatories as Monday marks the first anniversary of the Sudan War. It started when clashes erupted in the capital, Khartoum, between rival forces. The country's military, led by General Abdel Fattah Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, paramilitary faction, commanded by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. At least 8.2 million people have been displaced inside and outside Sudan since fighting broke out on April 15, 2023, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported. But the letter, signed by well-known creatives, states, "For too long, this terrible war has gone on virtually forgotten. Enough is enough." Lennox said, "We cannot sit back and watch this devastation unfold on our global sisters and innocent families. 1 year is 1 year too long. Sudanese women and children need action to be taken now." The letter, also signed by grassroots organisations across the globe, states, "Women and girls in Sudan must not be forgotten. The time to act is now. The Sudanese people are facing catastrophe. Since deadly fighting between two generals broke out in April last year, Sudanese civilians, and especially women and children, have been paying the price. 2 decades after ethnic cleansing in Darfur, there is again credible evidence of mass killings by the Rapid Support Forces. And as the RSF appear to be winning more battles, the risk of genocidal violence spreading is growing. As ever, women are bearing the brunt of this conflict. Sexual and gender-based violence is widespread and being perpetuated by all parties to the conflict. We are calling on the UK government and other key states to put meaningful pressure on the warring parties and the states that are sponsoring them to stop the war. Violations of arms embargoes should have immediate consequences, and sanctions should be applied against key individuals on both sides. From April 2023 to mid-December, at least 118 people in Sudan suffered sexual violence, including rape, gang rape and attempted rape, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights reported. It added that the numbers included 19 children. The research released in February this year said Rapid Support Forces, RSF, committed many of the rapes on streets and in homes, and one woman died after she was repeatedly gang raped over 35 days. Only 4 victims of sexual violence were willing and able to report it to authorities, owing to stigma, distrust of the justice system, the collapse of the institutions of justice, and fear of reprisals, it added. The Circle has funded South Sudan-based NGO Root of Generations, set up by a woman who was displaced as a child by war in the region. Its founder, Grace Dorong, said, "I ended up in a refugee camp in Kenya alone when I was between 5 and 7 years old. I know the impact of losing your home and being in fear. Women and children are especially at risk in times of conflict. The desperation and violence women are facing, including to their own children, is beyond imagining." Her organisation supports vulnerable households, seeks to end violence against women and girls, and now assists people who have escaped the crisis to displacement camps in Juba, the capital of South Sudan. She said her organisation shouldn't need to be doing this, and that decision makers and leaders should see the women and children in the mirror when they look at themselves. That article was by Laura Pollock. This is from The National on Monday, 15th April 2024, from the news section. Shrews found dead in littered bottle at Scottish beauty spot, by Laura Pollock. Volunteers have shared a warning to hikers and tourists after 2 shrew were found dead inside littered beer bottles at Glencoe. Glencoe National Nature Reserve rangers found a glass bottle of Corona while litter picking near Loch Ardriochen and saw mammals inside of it. The charity said 5 bags of waste were filled and removed from the site along with the bottle. They issued the warning issued on Saturday said that shrews, a small mole-like mammal, can often get in but not back out of small spaces with a smooth surface, such as a glass bottle. The post read, "We hope these photos shock and sadden you like they did us. While it might not be initially obvious, this discarded beer bottle contains 2 dead shrews. Shrews like to crawl inside small holes for cover and to hunt for insects, but the smooth surface of a bottle often makes it impossible to get back out. If they don't drown in rainwater or the liquid remnants of the container, they eventually die of stress, starvation or exposure when they're unable to dry off." Social media followers reacted on Facebook with the sadness and anger emojis and shared their outrage. One user wrote, "What scenario would shake the folk up who do this? Imagine not having your waste bins in your neighbourhood emptied for a month." Someone else wrote, "It makes me equally mad and sad. It's not rocket science. You have carried it in, carry it back out. You have chosen to visit these places because they're beautiful. Why leave litter and spoil it for everyone else?" Another said it was heartbreaking, while one added, "Why can't people just bin stuff? It's not difficult. They don't deserve to be in a beautiful place." The post has been shared over 2,000 times. That article was by Laura Pollock. This is from The National on Monday, 15th April 2024, from the Politics section. SNP mark anniversary of UK law which opened North Sea exploitation, by Xander Elliards. More than £300 billion has gone to the UK Treasury because of Scotland's North Sea energy resources, the SNP have said on the anniversary of the Act which first opened the area up to exploration and exploitation. Dave Doogan, the party's energy spokesperson at Westminster, called for the projected £20.6 billion which will be raised by taxes on North Sea oil and gas in the next 5 years to be spent on green energy projects in Scotland. Doogan spoke out on the 60th anniversary of the introduction of the Continental Shelf Act, which came into effect on April 15, 1964. According to the legislation's introductory text, it was passed in order to make provision as to the exploration and exploitation of the continental shelf. The SNP said that around £300 billion had been taken by the Treasury in tax from North Sea oil and gas since the Act was passed, and pointed to analysis from the Office for Budget Responsibility about how much it will continue to generate moving forward. In 2022-23, the OBR said some £9.8 billion had been raised thanks to the tax rate on North Sea profits, which will be in place until the end of March 2029. The OBR Economic and Fiscal Outlook report from March 2024 goes on, "We expect these taxes to raise £5.2 billion in 2023-24, a £4.6 billion fall in receipts on 22-23, due to sharply lower energy prices and lower production. We expect receipts to fall further from 23-24 to reach £2.2 billion by 2028-29 as energy prices and production decline." Despite the declining totals year on year, the OBR expects North Sea taxes to raise some £20.6 billion by 2029, the SNP said. Doogan commented, "This anniversary is a pertinent reminder of the fact that for 60 years Scotland's vast energy resources have been under Westminster control. Instead of investing the £300 billion in Scotland's North Sea revenue to build up infrastructure, to grow the economy, to tackle poverty or invest in public services, that money was squandered by successive Westminster governments to prop up a failing UK economic system. This is as true today as it was 60 years ago. That's why Scotland's energy will be at the heart of the general election campaign, and why a vote for the SNP is a vote to control our energy future. A vote for the SNP is a vote for powers over energy to be in Scotland's hands with independence, not Westminster's. This is Scotland's energy, and it must first and foremost benefit the people and communities of Scotland. Doogan went on, "With independence, we will do what Labour and the Tories have failed to do, make Scotland's energy work for Scotland, not for Westminster. That means that in energy-rich Scotland, people shouldn't be paying some of the highest energy bills in Europe during this cost of living crisis. It means reinvesting Scotland's energy wealth back into our communities rather than seeing it flow to Westminster. And it means the taxation that is still to come from the North Sea should be reinvested into growing the green economy in Scotland. The future of Scotland's energy goes to the very heart of the choice that will come at the general election. Westminster isn't working for Scotland, and it's time that decisions about Scotland were taken in Scotland, for Scotland, to benefit the people of Scotland." That article was by Xander Elliards. This is from The National on Monday, 15th April 2024, from the News section. A83. Traffic Scotland provides update on Rest and Be Thankful. by Adam Robertson. The A83 Rest and Be Thankful remains closed following a period of heavy rain. The major road through Argyll has been closed since 12 p.m. on Wednesday, April 10th, following a yellow warning for rain. Although the alert ended at 10 p.m. on Wednesday, Traffic Scotland said diversions via the Old Military Road remain in place. In an update on Monday morning, it said the road will be open for the A83 Rest and Be Thankful traffic as a safety precaution. Conditions will be monitored and an assessment is to be made late on Monday morning, Traffic Scotland added. We told last week how significant movements on the hillside following the very heavy rain brought boulders to the surface, causing concern for the safety of those on the road. Over the weekend, Bear Scotland worked to deal with the boulder risk and monitored the movement on the hillside. That article was by Adam Robertson.
From the National, Monday the 15th of April, from the comment section. Scotland can learn lessons of short-sighted Westminster policies. This article is written by A. Wilson Mackey. Long Gannet was the largest coal-fired power station in Europe, its 600-foot chimney towering over the Forth estuary. As a young National Coal Board auditor, I will never forget its vast grounds, fed by an ingenious underground conveyor belt system linking the newly opened Castle Bridge to the remaining Fife pits, stretching to the horizon and hosting 2 million tonnes of coal, enough to keep it going for 2 years. Minor strikes of the early 1970s, about wages and conditions, power cuts et al. Had public sympathy. The strike of 1984 was about pit closures. Determined to burn down the power of the unions, the Tory government had prepared. With no green agenda, as there is in the present day, decisions had been made. No deep mines in Scotland beyond the year 2000. Most closed by 1990 and the newer Long Gannet complex shut in 2002. In 1983, Margaret Thatcher personally appointed one Ian Kinloch McGregor to head the National Coal Board, paying Lazars, his then employer, £1.8 million to secure his services. Born in Kinloch Leven in 1912, he had a Calvinist upbringing. He was knighted in 1986 and had no time for trade unions or their rights. With a history both in America and closer to home with the reorganisation of British Steel, ironically a Labour Prime Minister, Jim Callaghan had brought him across from the US to sort out the mess at British Leyland in the 1970s. The Torness nuclear power station was approved in 1980 and became operational in 1988 at a controversial cost of £2 billion, supplementing Hunterston B, approved by a Labour government in 1968, to together provide Scotland with half its energy needs. The main oil burning station in Scotland at Inverkip, commissioned when the oil was cheap in 1970, never ran at full capacity after the oil crisis in 1973, except, tellingly, when the miners' strike was in full flow during 1984-85. The public were conditioned to see why closure of the pits would make sense. No power cuts from industrial action. They were dangerous, unhealthy, losing £50 million annually in Scotland. Safer, productive open cast mines would assume the slack, making around £50 million profit. The South of Scotland Electricity Board was still effectively in public ownership. The coal-fired power stations, Long Gannet, Crockenzie, Methil and the ageing Kincardine, were the big market for Scottish coal, and we had an export market too. The miners united will never be defeated was chanted bravely on the picket lines. Comparatively well paid, particularly in England where the bonuses were far greater, the achievements of the 1970s industrial action were arguably the undoing of any united National Union of Mine Workers movement. The 1984-85 strike was led by Yorkshire's Arthur Scargill. He was outed as strategically inept. His calls for further strikes in 1986 were largely ignored. In 1985, with unemployment high and violent scenes on picket lines, the better life of owning their council houses under the Conservative Right to Buy scheme, arguably responsible for the housing crisis we face now, left them with mortgages to pay, and the miners drifted back to work. Thousands of police were deployed from all over the country to combat Scargill's flying pickets, who aggressively targeted those returning to work. The government, channeling substantial taxpayers' money through NCB's subsidy schemes, indirectly paid for the bus companies to fortify their vehicles and find drivers willing to drive through the picket lines. There were 11,291 people arrested, 8,392 charged, 200 imprisoned, and 9,000 dismissed, even if not charged. The last deep mine in the UK, Kalingley in North Yorkshire, was closed in 2015. 14 coal-fired power stations, all in England, still existed in 2015, using mostly imported coal. Torness, owned since 2009 by EDF, the French state company, is scheduled to close in 2030. The decommissioning costs will run into billions, but it was previously under state-owned Scottish Nuclear, which was merged into British Energy and privatised in 1996. The Labour government of 1997 did not look to renationalise it. Interestingly, respected Scottish National Union of Mine Workers leader Mike McGahey, appalled at what had happened in Scotland, advocated for a Scottish Parliament within a federal UK. With the pit closure, we lost the finest of engineers, with families torn apart. Communities and community cohesion were eliminated, and the work camaraderie was replaced by bitterness and mental health problems. Breakdowns were inevitable and predictable, with some never recovering from broken hearts. 40 years later, can those affected apologise and forgive each other to heal social wounds? Those still alive from the government of that era could offer an apology. Will their successors learn from the recent public inquiry? Well, no. But the real tragedy would be not to use the intelligent hindsight to learn how short-sighted Westminster policies come to get us in different guises, resulting in negative economic and social consequences which last for decades and sometimes centuries. That was a comment piece by A. Wilson Mackey, who is a member of Business for Scotland, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and runs a successful business with his wife and business partner. From the National, Monday the 15th of April, from the comment section. We are still paying for George Osborne and David Cameron. Article by Robbie Mockery, Scottish Currency Group. Western economic thought had its roots in ancient Greece. It has flourished since the 13th century, evolving into political economy during the 18th century Enlightenment, and taking on its modern form after Keynes worked out what needed to be done to end the Great Depression. Throughout that time, economic thinking has emphasised the value of Aristotle's concept of household management, oikonomika, virtue or excellence, arete, and human flourishing, eudaimonia. Understanding the nature of well-being and promoting it has always been central to economic thinking. Economics is the analysis of the use of resources to achieve greater well-being. Well-being economics is nothing new. It's a call to return to the traditional core of economic thinking. That's why the Scottish Currencies Group wants to establish a well-being monetary economy after independence. As the lifeblood of every modern economy, money has a wide range of functions. Without money, there would be no prices, no easy way of making payments, and no liquid stores of value. The economy would not be able to carry out its primary function of ensuring resources will flow from the people who have acquired them to the people who value them most. Do no harm should be the core guiding principle of Scotland's well-being monetary economy. Losing sight of that has been the main cause of economic recessions in the last 40 years. They tend to follow periods of debt-financed asset price inflation. These occur when asset prices start to increase because banks believe borrowers will be able to sell assets at a higher price in future. However, the underlying cause of rising monetary value of assets is the bank's lending. Banks' decisions lead to a gap between monetary values and real values. Such financial bubbles almost inevitably burst. When the bubble, which expanded in the early years of this century, burst in 2008, Scotland's proud history of being a leading centre of banking effectively ended overnight. That was very unfortunate, but the harm which bankers' folly causes the whole of society isn't a sudden freeze on hiring graduates with dreams of avarice and financial losses for state shareholders when a few badly run institutions collapse. The crisis of 2008 was followed by a recession which lasted through to 2012 because George Osborne and David Cameron didn't understand well enough how an economy works. That led into the rise of populism and Brexit, as English voters eloquently expressed their contempt for business as usual politics. During the recession of 2009 to 12, economists were puzzled by the relatively small increase in unemployment. From experience, my younger colleagues are quick to point out that there was an increase in underemployment. Traditionally, with an unemployment rate of 10% for every 9 people in jobs, there's someone looking for work. For that person, unemployment is 100%. With underemployment, there doesn't need to be anyone out of work, but if a quarter of the workforce is on a 3-day week instead of a 5-day week, there's effectively 10% unemployment. One way of thinking about flexible working is that it spreads the pain of a recession so that more people feel a little worse off. The eminent historian of economics and finance, Professor John Turner, believes the 2008 crisis was so large that it will take up to 25 years for the UK to recover from it. The post-crash recession was just the start of harm which the financial crisis had caused. When banks cause a bubble, financial markets overestimate the value of their assets. After the bubble bursts, banks need to recapitalise their businesses. To stabilise their position, they cut back on lending. Productive investment shudders to a halt. Innovation slows down, diminishing sharply our ability to address economic and social problems. During the period of low investment since 2008, workers' productivity has not increased quickly. Wages have stagnated. An important part of economic well-being in the modern economy is that people have become accustomed to becoming better off over time. That has not happened recently. Especially for young people, successive governments have breached the social contract. As so often in economics, the founding principles of a monetary well-being economy are to be found in Adam Smith's penetrating analysis. He urged the patient accumulation of capital as the basis of the wealth of nations. Inherently suspicious of any get-rich-quick schemes promoted by bankers, he urged careful regulation of the monetary innovation of his day. Banknotes, expecting that banks' productive lending would be based on an assessment of the character of the borrowers. For those reasons, the Scottish Currency Group wishes to establish a Scottish Monetary Research Institute as an important step in the path to independence, providing clarity about the regulatory framework which will support Scotland's well-being monetary economy. And that was a comment piece by Robbie Mockery, Scottish Currency Group.
The National, recorded on Monday, 15th of April 2024. The Culture section. Glasgow, pipe band stuns commuters in Central Station with surprise performance, by Gregor Young. A pipe band has entertained passengers and staff with a surprise performance at a busy city railway station. A crowd gathered to watch as the Scottish Power Pipe Band played at Glasgow Central on Saturday afternoon. Dressed in their trademark Scottish Power tartan kilts, the musicians performed Dougie MacLean's Caledonia, followed by their take on Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. The band, which is played across the globe and is regularly placed in the World Pipe Band Championships, is led by Pipe Major Chris Armstrong and Drum Sergeant Jake Jorgensen. Chris Armstrong said, "We've been lucky enough to perform in some amazing locations across the world, but it was really special to play in Glasgow Central Station. As home to Scottish Power's HQ and the host city for the World Championships, Glasgow holds a very special place in our hearts, and it was amazing to see the reaction of the audience. We could have played all afternoon. It was definitely one of our more unusual practice sessions and sets us up brilliantly for forthcoming competitions, including the UK Pipe Band Championships in 18 May in Bangor, and the British Pipe Band Championships in June 8 in Forres. Thanks to everyone who took the time to watch, and hopefully no one missed their train. The band has been sponsored by Scottish Power since 1989. SP Energy Network's Scott Matheson, who is also chairman of the Pipe Band, said, "The Scottish Power Pipe Band always blows audiences away with their performances, but the added element of surprise at Glasgow Central Station was a real standout moment. We're so proud to sponsor such a talented team of pipers and drummers, and loved seeing them showcase their skills in such a fun and different way. There's lots of more exciting performances to come this year, and we can't wait to follow them in their musical journey. By Gregor Young, The National, recorded on Tuesday, 16th of April 2024. The Culture Section. Scottish Island Cafe teams up with Edinburgh Restaurant for fine dining experience. By Adam Robertson, multimedia journalist. A cafe in Skye has teamed up with a restaurant in Edinburgh to create a fine dining supper club experience for one night only. The owner of Cafe Cool in Skye, Claire Coghill, and the owner of Edinburgh's Year restaurant will collaborate on a 6-course menu. Will infuse the former's island-produced inspired dishes with fine dining restaurant Year's clean, precise and seasonal cooking to bring something new to the island. Year first opened in 2018 and is situated in Broughton Street in the capital. Since opening, it has been listed in the Good Food and Michelin Guides and has won a number of awards. Cafe Cool, meanwhile, curates local and Scottish artisan makers of a range of products including food and drinks as well as books, skincare and ceramics. The chefs will alternate courses using local Skye produce and ingredients foraged by the chefs themselves to create a unique menu. Priced at £90 for 6 courses, a welcome drink will be provided at the event, which will take place on Saturday, May 4 at Cafe Cool in Carbost. Anyone wishing to secure a booking should contact Cafe Cool on 01478 640 575 or email info@cafecool.com. The menu is as follows: venison, smoked egg, wild herb, berry meal sourdough, aged butter, brunost, Dunvegan crab ravioli, whiskey bisque, dill, asparagus, sunflower seed, wild garlic, scallop, Douglas fir, kohlrabi, Hebridean hogget, Jerusalem artichoke, anchovy, rhubarb, white chocolate, gorse, blood orange, finishing dram, rowan shoot snaps. On the event, Coghill from Cafe Cool said, "I'm really excited to have Scott up from Year to demonstrate the best of Scottish cooking. I admire his work and look forward to sharing my cool kitchen with him for the evening. Skye's seasonal produce is in abundance at this time of year, so it's going to be a really special dinner." Smith, meanwhile, added, "The Isle of Skye is one of my favourite parts of the world, and I'm looking forward to joining the talented Claire at Cafe Cool to give the island a taste of what we get up to at our restaurant in Edinburgh. Skye's produce is some of the best in the world, and I can't wait to get my hands on it and work with Claire to create a show-stopping menu and put on an unforgettable evening." By Adam Robertson, The National, recorded on Tuesday, 16th of April 2024. The Culture Section. Thousands of Robert Burns artefacts put online for first time. By Alistair Ferguson, multimedia journalist. More than 2,500 internationally important Robert Burns artefacts are being made available to view online for the first time. The items, which belong to the National Trust for Scotland's Burns collection, include manuscripts, photographs and letters which are rarely displayed to the public. Among the objects being made available are Burns's wife, Jean Armour's wedding ring, a lock of hair belonging to Highland Mary, and a pair of the Scots poet's blue woolen initialed socks. There is also a fragment of one of only 6 known manuscripts of Auld Lang Syne dating from 1793. The online portal is hoped to make the artefacts and work belonging to the world-famous poet more accessible. Susie Hillhouse, the collections manager at the National Trust for Scotland, said, "We're excited to be bringing our incredible Robert Burns collection to people across the world through this online platform. This project, which has been in the works for over 12 months, will allow people to engage with items in the collections like never before. We're currently only able to show a proportion of these items at our award-winning Robert Burns Birthplace Museum in Alloway. Now anyone will be able to search the collections, zoom in to tiny details, and experience the full collection of over 2,500 items, 24/7 from anywhere in the world. The time and investment that has gone into creating this online collection demonstrates the Trust's commitment to making heritage accessible for everyone. Manuscripts of Scots Wahey, the Lament of Mary, Queen of Scots, On the Approach of Spring, and the first printed uncut edition of Kilmarnock Edition will be available to the public for the first time. Established in 1931, the National Trust for Scotland is Scotland's largest conservation charity. It is the caretaker for more than 5,000 Burns-related items at the Burns birthplace in Alloway, South Ayrshire. Ali MacLeod, head of fundraising at the National Trust for Scotland, said, "We hope that we can learn from this project and that it might pave the way for us to develop further online collections as part of our strategy to make Scotland's important history accessible to everyone, both now and in the future." By Alistair Ferguson.
The National News on Wednesday, the 17th of April. Call for change as only a quarter of rape cases end with conviction. An article written by Steph Braun. Change is urgently needed in order for rape survivors to get justice, campaigners have said. Statistics show that less than a quarter of those accused of the crime are convicted. The latest figures released by the Scottish Government show the 5-year average conviction rate is just 24% for those accused of rape or attempted rape, with a single charge on the indictment. For 2022-2023, the conviction rate stood at 25.5%, which was an improvement on the previous year of 22.1%, the worst rate recorded in the past 5 years. The figure for convictions of all crimes is considerably higher, at 84%. Rape Crisis Scotland has stressed that change is needed and is urging MSPs to get behind proposals in the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill currently going through Parliament, which it says could radically change how survivors experience the justice system. The bill includes plans to pilot judge-led trials for rape cases and scrap the not-proven verdict. The verdict is unique to Scots law and there is no equivalent in other jurisdictions. Sandy Brindley, Chief Executive of Rape Crisis Scotland, said, "New figures released by the Scottish Government show the stark reality of just how difficult it is for survivors to get justice after rape. These figures only relate to those cases that reach court. Most rapes reported to the police never make it to court. Far too many survivors are being left with no sense of justice. There is robust research to show that rape myths have a significant impact on jury decision-making in sexual offence cases. Survivors also often tell us that the experience of going to court is more traumatic than the experience of sexual violence itself. It couldn't be clearer that change is urgently needed. The Scottish Government's Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill includes proposals which could radically change how survivors experience the justice system, including scrapping the not-proven verdict, introducing specialist sexual offence courts and a pilot of judge-led trials for rape cases. We very much hope members from across the Chamber will take its proposal seriously and vote to improve the experience of seeking justice in Scotland for survivors of sexual violence. The bill will return to Holyrood next week for debate. Other proposals include reducing the size of criminal juries from 15 to 12. The bill aims to address a number of issues around serious sexual offences, creating a new specialist sexual offences court. The legislation would also guarantee an automatic right to state-funded independent legal representation for complainers when applications are made by the defence to lead evidence on their sexual history or bad character in sexual offence cases. An article written by Steph Braun. The National Politics on Wednesday, the 17th of April. First Minister confirms Scottish Government plans for devolution of employment law. An article written by Lucy Jackson and read by Howell. Humza Yousaf has announced he will lay out the Scottish Government's plans for the devolution of employment law in the coming weeks. Speaking at the STUC Annual Congress in Dundee yesterday, the First Minister said he was keen for the powers to be sent to Holyrood, a policy which has been opposed by both the Tories and Labour. In the coming weeks, I intend to deliver a speech setting out precisely what can be done if we had full control of employment law, he said. Mr Yousaf added that he was very keen to ensure everyone is involved in the discussion about the Scottish Government's stance on employment law, regardless of their position on Scottish independence. He said, "I know that there are differing views on the question of independence for Scotland. But I also know there is a lot of interest in what we could do with employment powers. I believe that with the full powers of independence, we could do so much more. In his speech to trade unionists, Mr. Youssef also thanked the movement for everything that they have done for Scotland. He added that the Scottish Government was committed to working with trade unions wherever possible. The First Minister recognised that amidst the flurry of very deliberate misinformation about the Hate Crime Act, which came into effect this month, those experiencing most instances of hate are ordinary working people. Mr. Youssef said, "The people who have not been given so much airtime are, of course, the everyday victims of hate crime, of which we know there are far too many in our society. We've heard virtually nothing about the people who experience hate while at work, frontline workers who, just for doing their job, sometimes suffer the most disgraceful discrimination, abuse and threats. They may not have the powerful connections to get their stories told, but friends, all of us here are listening to them." He added that he believed the Act is being enforced in a proportionate way. Looking ahead to the upcoming general election, Mr. Youssef said the Tories were finished after making life harder for ordinary working people. "I don't think that in any way, shape or form that I'm going out on a limb here when I say I think and I hope that this Tory government is finished," he said. "I'm certain that I'm not offending anybody in this room when I say that I cannot wait to see the back of them. Good riddance to the Conservatives who have heaped such misery on households right across this country." Mr. Youssef said that virtually everything the UK government has done since the Tories took office in 2010 has made life harder for ordinary families, for working people, for minority groups up and down this country. He added that politicians standing at the next election should be judged on their values, criticising Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer for refusing to scrap the two-child benefit cap, while committing to scrapping a cap on bankers' bonuses. Addressing delegates at the annual conference, Mr. Youssef said, "Every single politician standing for election in the upcoming general election should be judged on their values. Sir Keir Starmer's values will see him lift the cap on bankers' bonuses, but not lift the two-child benefit cap, that are, in my estimation, the wrong values and the wrong priorities. In this election, Scotland has the choice of values, and I will be calling on people to vote for what they believe in. Vote for a progressive future vote for the Scotland I think we all want to see." Meanwhile, speaking to The National yesterday, Mr. Youssef said he would always encourage workers to join a trade union after the support he's received from them during his lifetime. "I would absolutely encourage workers to join a trade union," Mr. Youssef said. "I've benefited from the personal support, not just professional support, of trade unions over my lifetime, particularly in standing up against hatred." Mr. Youssef said he was not currently a member of a union due to the potential conflict of interest which may arise with his position as First Minister, but confirmed he did belong to a union whilst working as a parliamentary researcher. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The National. World News on Wednesday the 17th of April. Huge blaze engulfs landmark Danish building. An article written by Gregor Young. Fire raged through one of Copenhagen's oldest buildings yesterday, the 17th century old stock exchange, or Børsen, with its famous spire collapsing. The blaze began in its copper roof and spread to much of the building, which was undergoing renovations and shrouded in scaffolding, with parts of the roof also collapsing, firefighter spokesman Jakob Vedsted Andersen said. The fire was first reported at 7:30 a.m. The cause was not immediately known. Ambulances were at the scene, but there were no reports of casualties. Huge billows of smoke rose over downtown Copenhagen, and people were seen rushing inside the building to save the paintings. "The extinguishing work is very difficult," Mr. Andersen said, adding that there are parts of the building that the firefighters cannot enter because it's too dangerous. The building, which was once Denmark's financial centre and is situated next to the Christiansborg Palace, where the Parliament sits, is a popular tourist attraction. Its distinctive spire, in the shape of the tails of 4 dragons entwined together, reached a height of 56 metres. Members of an army unit were deployed to cordon off the area, and the Danish Emergency Management Agency was also helping. The Danish Chamber of Commerce moved into the building after the stock exchange left in 1974. Its head, Brian Mickelson, was amongst those helping to carry paintings out of the building. "It's a national disaster," Mr. Mickelson said. An article written by Gregor Young. The National Politics on Wednesday, the 17th of April. Liz Truss reveals she wanted to cancel Glasgow's COP26. An article written by Hamish Morrison. Liz Truss has revealed she unsuccessfully tried to cancel the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. In her new book, 10 Years to Save the West, the former Prime Minister said it was ironic that after lobbying against Britain hosting the event, she would become a key host. Ms Truss blasted the event as virtue signalling and claimed her erstwhile cabinet colleagues were gripped by climate fever and posing for selfies with Greta Thunberg. She said that while serving as Chief Secretary to the Treasury in 2018, then Environment Secretary Michael Gove had called her the Grinch who wants to stop Christmas because of her campaign to ditch COP26. Ms Truss wrote in the book, "With an estimated price tag of over £200 million, I strongly questioned whether organising this jamboree would be a priority for the government. I was in a minority of one, yet again. We were in the midst of the fraught Brexit negotiations, and I thought the last thing that the UK needed was to host tens of thousands of delegates at an international shindig that was bound to create more hot air than genuine environmental solutions. From the reaction of my colleagues, you would have thought I had just suggested napalming the Brazilian rainforest." Britain's shortest-serving Prime Minister said that while she believed carbon emissions had to be reduced, there were no quick wins to be had. Ms Truss added, "More than anything, bidding for COP26 was about appeasing the Green lobby by making a grand gesture aimed at gaining short-term popularity without changing the fundamentals. It was environmental virtue signalling, with the taxpayer picking up the hefty bill. We had seen too much of this in government over the years, but the rest of the cabinet was in the grip of climate fever. When they weren't posing for selfies with Greta Thunberg, they were busy trying to ban wood-burning stoves and plastic straws." The former Prime Minister said she had, however, enjoyed attending the Glasgow conference, allowing her to visit her old stomping ground of nearby Paisley, and used it to pursue my agenda on the margins. She wrote, "It was ironic that after trying to cancel COP26, I should end up being a key host of the event. I was deputed to greet leaders and ministers who had flown in from around the world on gas-guzzling jets to talk earnestly about reducing carbon emissions. I love Glasgow, where the conference was held, and was able to visit my old stomping ground of Paisley nearby, as well as my favourite chip shop from my school days, the Hippy Chippy. COP26 was exactly the hot air fest that I predicted it would be back in 2018, but I was able to pursue my agenda on the margins. I had the job of escorting the then Duchess of Cornwall around the reception at Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum. This was a great pleasure, as she is very amusing and popular, so much so that we didn't make it from one side of the room to the other." COP26 saw countries from around the world agree the Paris Rulebook, a set of guidelines for achieving reduced carbon emissions. These include requirements to make the reporting of carbon emissions more transparent and establishing shared deadlines for reducing emissions. An article written by Hamish Morrison. The National News on Wednesday, the 17th of April. Minister to attend cross-party summit on the future of Ferguson Marine Shipyard. An article written by Ross Hunter. A senior Scottish Government minister has agreed to take part in a summit on the future of the Ferguson Marine Shipyard. Wellbeing Economy Secretary Mary McCallan will attend the second cross-party summit, where crucial talks will be held on how to deliver new contracts for the troubled shipyard. Announcing the plans at the STUC Congress in Dundee, the GMB Scotland Union said it will facilitate the discussions next month between all those invested in the shipyard's future. It comes after Ms McCallan attended the launch of the Glen Rosa last week, promising to stand with the shipyard long into the future. The Glen Rosa and its sister vessel, the Glen Sannox, both built at the Port Glasgow shipyard, have been hit by significant delays and overspends. The Glen Rosa had a target date of September next year for when it will first carry passengers on the Clyde and Hebrides network. Meanwhile, the Glen Sannox undertook sea trials earlier in the year. Speaking at the conference in Dundee, Alex Logan, GMB convener at Ferguson Marine, announced Ms McCallan would attend the next summit, adding that he hoped it would bring urgent reassurance on future contracts for the shipyard. He called for the Scottish Government to award the contract for 7 small CalMac ferries to the yard urgently to protect jobs, which are crucial to Inverclyde. Mr Logan said, "We have been clear to the Scottish Government that if it wants to secure a future for the yard and the jobs there, then it needs investment to modernise the yard and make it more competitive. We need a direct award of the small ferries, which we have a track record in building, and continued public ownership. Like many of the workers at Ferguson Marine before me, I've been a shipbuilder there all my life. What we're fighting for now is the future for the generations to come." Ms McCallan said, "I've been absolutely clear that I will leave no stone unturned when it comes to securing a sustainable future for Ferguson Marine and for wider shipbuilding on the Clyde. I'm looking forward to attending this summit in the interests of collaborating with GMB Scotland, the yard, the workers and all stakeholders who share this objective. The best way for Ferguson Marine to secure future work is to improve its competitiveness. Direct award is legal only in strictly limited circumstances under public procurement rules. The Scottish Government is currently considering future vessel contracts from public agencies, including the Small Vessel Replacement Programme, to determine whether any might legally be open to direct award." An article written by Ross Hunter. The National, on Wednesday the 17th of April. Opinion. We live in dangerous times, but we must not lose focus on Gaza. A column written by Mark Brown. I argued in my column for The National 2 weeks ago that the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, which killed 7 members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, including 2 generals, was a reckless act that increased considerably the danger of a wider conflict in the Middle East. This, I have to say, was no great insight on my part. Any serious observer of the geopolitics of the region could see that Israel's provocation was intended to elicit a response from Iran and its regional allies, and in turn bring Israel's Western allies to its defence, despite their increasing nervousness about the scale of the Zionist state's slaughter in Gaza. And so it has turned out. In addition to Iran's retaliatory attack on Israel, which involved 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles and 110 ballistic missiles, its Lebanese ally Hezbollah is believed to have launched 2 waves of rockets on the Golan Heights, the Syrian territory illegally occupied by Israel since 1967. Iranian allied groups in both Iraq and Yemen are also believed to have fired missiles at Israel. In truth, despite the mainstream Western media's hyperventilating about Iran's first ever attack on Israeli territory, the Iranian action was extremely ineffectual and was always likely to be. In addition to Israel's own military capabilities, including the famous Iron Dome anti-missile defense system, which was largely paid for by the United States, Israel received military assistance in countering the attack from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and long-standing Western ally Jordan. More than 99% of the ordnance fired by Iran and its allies was brought down either before it reached Israeli airspace or immediately upon it doing so, and none of the cruise missiles fired by Iran made it as far as Israel. United States officials briefed broadcaster CBS that a grand total of 5 ballistic missiles evaded the countermeasures by Israel and its allies. 4 of these are believed to have landed with minimal impact on the Nevatim Air Force Base in the Negev Desert. All of which fits well within the prediction made by Marwan Bishara, the excellent Middle East analyst of news channel Al Jazeera English. On the eve of Iran's action against Israel and immediately following Iran's seizing of a container ship connected to Israel on Saturday, Mr. Bishara suggested that while the Iranian government had to be seen to respond to the April the 1st attack in Damascus, it would want to do so in terms that did not lead to a wider war with Israel and the United States. In fact, noting that the United States and Iran have back-channel contacts via Oman, Mr. Bishara argued that it was even possible that the Americans might give a nod and a wink to Iranian action that would enable Tehran to save face while having minimal impact on Israel. The attacks, eye-catching though they were, fit Mr. Bishara's description perfectly. That said, neither Mr. Bishara or any other serious observer would deny that a plan in which Tehran saves face and the United States restrains Israel is fraught with dangers. What, for example, if the most belligerent elements in Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right coalition Israeli government, such as the fascist Minister for National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is a long-standing supporter of the late Israeli fascist leader Meir Kahane, were to prevail, prompting Israel to escalate matters further by bombing targets in Iran, for instance? Whatever the dangers of the Israeli-Iranian tit-for-tat attacks, it's incumbent on people of conscience to keep their focus on the central issue in the Middle East at this time, namely the ongoing genocide in Gaza. There is a gaping chasm between the quick and effective action taken by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and notably the Arab state of Jordan to shoot down Iranian missiles and drones targeted at Israel, and the shameful lack of action by those same states to prevent the utter devastation of the Gaza Strip. On Saturday, United States President Joe Biden described his administration as being devoted to the security of Israel. Devotion, as Mr. Bishara noted on Al Jazeera, is an extraordinary term to use with regard to relations between countries. It certainly goes well beyond commitment or solidarity. If only the United States, the richest and most powerful state in human history, had shown devotion to the safety, security and the right to life of the Palestinian population of Gaza. Imagine if, as Mr. Netanyahu planned his revenge on Gaza following the October the 7th attacks on Israel, Mr. Biden had made the continuation of the United States' massive military and economic assistance to the Israeli state dependent on the protection of the civilian infrastructure and human life in the Gaza Strip. Had that, rather than devotion to Israel, been the priority in the White House, we would not now be looking at a Gaza that resembles the kind of vision of apocalyptic destruction that we usually only expect to see in movies. More than 33,000 Gazans would not now be dead, and more than 1 in every 50 children in the territory would not be dead, maimed or injured. The World Health Organization would not be having to report on Israel's wholesale destruction of Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, and its eradication of the overwhelming majority of the Strip's hospitals and medical services. And the United States administration itself, in the shape of Secretary of State Antony Blinken, would not have to acknowledge in the middle of last month that its ally Israel has manufactured a famine that puts the entire surviving population of Gaza, that's more than 2 million people, at risk of starvation. The events of recent days have exposed the priorities of Mr. Biden in Washington, Mr. Sunak in London, and Monsieur Macron in Paris. For them, the interests of their regional ally Israel, a state created as a Western colonial outpost in the Middle East, come far ahead of the lives of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Those of us living in the major states of the West must channel our anger at the moral hypocrisy of our so-called leaders into building an ever bigger movement in solidarity with Palestine. A column written by Mark Brown. The National News on Wednesday, the 17th of April. Bar staff sacked after strike win compensation. An article written by Hamish Morrison. Workers at a bar who were sacked after going on strike have won compensation from their employer after a court battle. Judge Whitcomb has ordered the owners of the 13th Note in Glasgow, which is in liquidation, to pay staff compensation after they were sacked unlawfully. He said Jacqueline Fennessy, who owned the former bar and venue, had failed to properly consult on sacking more than 20 workers. Workers took the unusual step of unionising, which led to what Representative described as Scotland's first bartender strike in 20 years. Brian Simpson, Unite's lead organiser for the hospitality sector, hailed the ruling as a complete vindication for the workers who unionised in the face of shocking conditions, which saw the venue closed down by environmental health. Glasgow City Council ordered the closure of the venue in June last year after it failed an environmental health inspection. Mr Simpson added, the mass redundancy came 3 days after workers took historic strike action in one of the most blatant examples of trade union victimisation I've ever seen. Let this be a warning to unscrupulous hospitality employers everywhere. Your workers will win justice and Unite will have their back. Nick Troy, the lead Unite representative at the venue, said workers were looking at how they could take over the 13th node. He said, we unionised to win a fairer and safer workplace at 13th Note, but Jacqueline Fennessy did everything she could to stop us, including closing our workplace. She issued a press release to the media before telling her own workers that they had lost their jobs. With legal justice, we can now turn our focus onto taking the venue back into workers' hands so that Glasgow has a unionised bar and music venue that pays and treats its workers with respect. In his judgment, Judge Whitcomb said the owners failed to respond to the claims put forward at the tribunal. Ms Fennessy was required under the Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act to oversee the election of an employee representative and to consult with that person on the proposed redundancies. It's not yet known exactly how much workers are owed. An article written by Hamish Morrison. The National News on Wednesday, the 17th of April. Scottish Power to pay out £1.5 million to customers who were overcharged. An article written by Alistair Ferguson. Scottish Power is to pay customers £1.5 million in refunds and compensation after it charged them more than the price cap during the height of the energy crisis. The firm charged a total of 1,699 direct debit customers a higher rate between 2015 and 2023 across 11 price cap periods, when that rate should only have applied to those who pay by standard credit or on receiving a bill. Scottish Power overcharged the customers on average £149 during the 8-year period. Ofgem said Scottish Power is to pay a total of £250,000 in direct refunds to affected customers, as well as another £250,000 in goodwill payments. This equates to an average of £294 per customer. All payments will be made automatically and customers do not need to do anything. Scottish Power said it had discovered that operational errors had led to the mistake and reported itself to Ofgem last summer. The power company has also agreed to pay £1 million to Ofgem's Energy Industry Voluntary Redress Fund, which benefits charities and community projects that help vulnerable customers with energy-related support. Dan Norton, Ofgem's Deputy Director for Price Protection, said, "The last few years have been challenging enough for energy customers facing increasing cost of living pressures, without the additional hardship of being overcharged. The price cap is there to protect consumers, and we take seriously any breaches of the safeguards we have put in place. Suppliers must be vigilant and act quickly to resolve billing errors that impact customers. We will continue to closely monitor all suppliers and will hold them to account if they do not meet the standards we set." Scottish Power said it had put additional controls and monitoring in place to reduce the risk of anything similar happening in future. Andrew Ward, Chief Executive of Scottish Power's Customer Business, said, "We're so sorry that a very small number of our customers were affected by this mistake and faced an increased financial burden, especially during a time when the energy prices were reaching an unprecedented high and the government had to step in to provide support. Looking after our customers is at the heart of everything we do, and our immediate notification to the regulator, swift corrective action and the compensation package agreed with Ofgem show both how seriously we take this matter and our commitment to making it right. An article written by Alistair Ferguson. The National News on Wednesday the 17th of April. Signatures on petition calling for Loyalist March to be banned passed the 5,000 mark. An article written by Adam Robertson. More than 5,000 people have now signed a petition calling for a Loyalist March set to take place in Inverness to be cancelled. The National previously reported that many people reacted with anger after Highland Council confirmed that a march organised by the Apprentice Boys of Derry will take place in Inverness on Saturday. It will mean a number of temporary road closures, which has also been criticised. A petition began last week by Alistair Marshall, who describes himself as a Highland resident concerned about the peace and harmony in our community, now has more than 5,000 signatures. Aberdeenshire Council recently blocked an Orange Order march in Stonehaven after nearly 10,000 people signed a similar petition. A Highland Council spokesperson said the notification process for the parade was dealt with according to the requirements of the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982 and our scheme of delegation. Details of the parade route were sent to Police Scotland, roads and local members for consultation, and no objections were received. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "We are aware of the planned march in Inverness on Saturday, April the 20th. Our policing operation will be proportionate and focused on public safety, as well as working closely with partners to reduce disruption to the wider community." The General Secretary of the Apprentice Boys of Derry said the Inverness branch of the organisation has been holding parades since opening 15 years ago. William Moore previously told the Inverness Courier, "There has never been trouble at the parade, which consists of a few hundred members. The event creates very little disruption." The people who describe the parade as a hate march really need to reflect on their own level of respect for other cultures and traditions. The parade is simply members of the association commemorating and celebrating their history and culture. That is a privilege our forefathers fought and died for, to ensure freedom of expression for everyone. An article written by Adam Robertson. The National Politics on Wednesday the 17th of April. Tories flouted key devolution rules 11 times. A front-page article written by Hamish Morrison. Scotland's top civil servants has accused the UK government of repeatedly breaking a key convention of the devolution era. Permanent Secretary John Paul Marks, the head of the civil service in Scotland, told MPs on Tuesday that ministers had flouted the Sewell Convention, which dictates that Westminster does not legislate in devolved matters without the consent of the Scottish Government, on a number of occasions in recent years. And he said that the controversial Internal Market Act, the devolution-busting legislation which helped scupper the deposit return scheme, had changed the nature of devolution. Speaking to Westminster's Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, Mr Marks said that while there were instances of Scotland's two governments working well together, this came amid a disrupted and quite regularly contested environment. He said that the Internal Market Act, which effectively gives the UK government a veto over some Scottish laws, had created a different operating environment to devolution compared to what went before. Mr Marks added, "You see that evidence in the Sewell Convention and legislative consent. So up to 2018, the Sewell Convention was always observed, and there were no circumstances where that consent was not granted, where the UK government would legislate without consent. But since 2018, there have been 11 occasions where that convention has not been followed. And so, to an extent, that reflects the changing nature of the political contexts post-Brexit." He called for both governments to pursue early engagement with one another, so ultimately we can both respect the devolution settlement but also support interoperability in the UK where it's necessary to do so. Elsewhere, Mr Marks noted that an interministerial group intended to connect the First Minister and the Prime Minister had met only once in 2 years instead of annually. But Mr Marks, who moved to the Scottish Government after a series of senior roles in the UK Government, including overseeing the creation of universal credit at the Department for Work and Pensions, was accused of treating the committee appearance as a job interview. The Permanent Secretary twice praised Michael Gove for his deep understanding of devolution. He also said that the Levelling Up Secretary had played a pivotal role in fostering good relations between the two governments. Mr Marks also made the case for civil servants having experience of working across the four nations of the UK, saying how many senior members of his team had previously worked at UK government departments such as the Home Office or the Department for Work and Pensions. The Alba Party's General Secretary Chris McElhenney said Mr Marks was a high flyer and a very capable member of the UK civil service. But he added, "It was always an odd appointment, as how was someone that sees themselves as a future Permanent Secretary in one of the great offices of state ever going to be the person to lead a Scottish civil service towards independence?" The career progression that Mr Marks desires depends on Scotland never becoming an independent country. Why that was never a concern to the last First Minister and why it's not a concern to the current First Minister is beyond me. It seems that today's appearance was treated by the Permanent Secretary as a job interview. A UK government spokesperson said, "We want to work constructively with the Scottish Government in the best interests of the people of Scotland, as we have done in many areas such as free ports and city deals. The devolution settlement is clear about the balance of power and responsibility that the UK and Scottish governments must respect, and which we continue to uphold." An article written by Hamish Morrison. The National News on Wednesday the 17th of April. The world's most advanced robot to be exhibited in Scotland. An article written by Adam Robertson. A humanoid robot described as the most advanced in the world will be showcased in Scotland. The National Robotarium, the UK Centre for Robotics and Artificial Intelligence based at Heriot-Watt University in partnership with the University of Edinburgh, has purchased the robot named Amica from Engineered Arts. Amica is described as able to interact with people in a natural and engaging way, and facial expressions include playful and pondering. The acquisition is a bid to demystify complex technologies and foster a greater understanding of the potential benefits of robotics and artificial intelligence. The robot has embedded microphones, cameras, facial recognition software, and articulated motorized components. The National Robotarium hopes to break down barriers and build trust between humans and robots by exhibiting Amica in schools and workshops to provide opportunities for people of all ages to interact directly with the robot and learn about the latest advancements in robotics and artificial intelligence. The Robotarium aims to introduce Amica as part of its public engagement initiatives by the summer. The facility is supported by £21 million from the UK Government and £1.4 million from the Scottish Government in a bid to turn Edinburgh into the data capital of Europe. Researchers will also use Amica to study public perceptions and attitudes towards humanoid robots, gathering valuable insights to inform the development of future technologies that prioritise trust, transparency and user-friendliness. Steve McLaren, Chief Operating Officer at the National Robotarium, said, "The arrival of Amica at the National Robotarium marks a significant step forward in our mission to make robotics more accessible and relatable to the people of Scotland, the UK and beyond. Since opening our doors in September 2022, we've successfully hosted more than 100 in-person and virtual events and engaged thousands of school-aged children. Amica represents an exciting opportunity to build on that success and take public engagement to the next level. By giving people the chance to interact with this state-of-the-art humanoid robot firsthand, we aim to demystify robotics, foster trust in human-robot interaction, and showcase the remarkable potential of these technologies to improve our daily lives and benefit society as a whole. Will Jackson, founder and chief executive of Engineered Arts Limited, said, "We are incredibly proud to have Amica join the many preeminent robots at the National Robotarium. Meeting an artificial intelligence embodied humanoid robot is a unique experience that very few people have witnessed, and we're very excited to be able to share what can be a profound moment with a wider audience." An article written by Adam Robertson.
The National, Thursday the 18th of April. Police Scotland recover 2 bodies from a Highland waterfall. Police have recovered the bodies of 2 men who fell into the water at a waterfall in the Highlands. Emergency services were called to Linn of Tummel, north of Pitlochry, on Wednesday evening, after reports that men aged 22 and 26 were in the water. The fire service sent 2 boat rescue units to the scene, where 2 bodies were recovered. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "Around 7 p.m. on Wednesday, we received a report of 2 men, aged 22 and 26 years, in the water at the Linn of Tummel waterfall near Blair Athol. Emergency services attended, and following searches in the area, the bodies of 2 men were recovered from water. Inquiries are ongoing to establish the full circumstances. However, there would not appear to be any suspicious circumstances surrounding these deaths. A report will be submitted to the Procurator Fiscal." That was an article by Lucy Jackson. The National, Thursday the 18th of April, from the news section. Scottish Government responds as NHS pause puberty blockers. The decision to stop prescribing puberty blockers to under 18s in Scotland has been labelled the wrong decision by campaigners, while others celebrated it as excellent news. The Scottish Government has also welcomed the decision, saying it had been made carefully and based on the best evidence available. It comes after the Sandiford Sexual Health Clinic in Glasgow, the only place in Scotland where under 18s are provided with trans health care, said it would pause new prescriptions of endocrine treatments which suppress pubertal changes. Scottish Trans, an affiliated group within the Equality Network, questioned the motivation behind the decision, saying that it was incredibly rare for any people under 18 being prescribed puberty blockers. The group said in a statement, this decision has been taken within the context where the reality of trans people's experience and lives is questioned almost daily in some of the media and some political circles. This makes us worry that the decision has been influenced by that context rather than solely through consideration of the best interests of trans children and young people. Scottish Trans and the Equality Network think this is the wrong decision, they added. The exceptionally rare and cautious choice of puberty blocker prescription, made for a small number after huge waits, is being wrongly painted by some as though it was commonplace and rushed. Nothing could be further from the truth. Figures from the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, released through Freedom of Information, show 5 people under 18 were prescribed puberty blockers in Scotland in 2023. In 2022 none had been, while in 2021 it was fewer than 5. The same figures show that hundreds of young people are referred to Sandiford's trans healthcare services each year. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and NHS Lothian said the decision to pause the prescriptions of puberty blockers came with the support of Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Gregor Smith, following a review by Dr Hilary Cass in England and the same decision being taken south of the border. NSGGC covers Sandiford, Scotland's only gender clinic for under 18s, while NHS Lothian provides care to those aged 18 and over at its Chalmers Gender Identity Clinic. The Health Board's decision was welcomed by SNP MP Joanna Cherry, who said on social media, "Excellent news and a vindication for all who called for this." The systemic review in the CAS report is an international piece of work, and there is no justification for not transferring the consequent recommendations across into clinical practice in Scotland. The Scottish Conservatives also welcomed the decision, but claimed the Scottish Government should have acted sooner, rather than letting medical professionals make the decision. Scottish Tory Deputy Leader Megan Gallagher said, "This long overdue decision should have been taken weeks ago, when NHS England put a pause on the prescribing of puberty blockers." Humza Yousaf repeatedly passed the buck, insisting it was up to clinicians to decide on the efficacy of puberty blockers, and saying he wouldn't be rushed into responding to CAS when it was clear decisive action was required. Tory MSP Ross McCall said on social media that the Scottish Parliament should have been the first to be told of the decision, which was announced publicly by the Sandiford Clinic on Thursday after patients had been informed. Scottish Health Secretary Neil Gray welcomed the decision from the health boards. He said, "The Scottish Government welcomes the joint statement from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and NHS Lothian, confirming their change in clinical policy on prescribing puberty hormone suppressants and cross-sex hormone medication to young people. We have been clear it is for clinicians and health boards to make decisions about clinical pathways, and that these decisions should be made carefully and based on the best evidence available. This is what both health boards have done, and their position is supported by the Chief Medical Officer." More broadly, the CAS Review's final report and findings are being closely considered by both the Scottish Government and health boards, in the context of how such healthcare can be best delivered in Scotland. We agree with Dr. Hilary Cass when she highlights that increasingly toxic, ideological and polarised public debate does nothing to serve the young people accessing its care, their families and the NHS staff working hard to care for them. I remain clear that it is right that those most impacted by this change were the first to hear about these changes, sensitively and from the services caring for them. They are who should be at the centre of our thoughts when we discuss this issue. Dr. Amelia Crichton, Director of Public Health, said, "The findings informing the CAS review are important, and we have reviewed the impact on our clinical pathways. The next step from here is to work with the Scottish Government and academic partners to generate evidence that enables us to deliver safe care for our patients." We echo the views of Dr. Hilary Cass that toxicity around public debate is impacting the lives of young people seeking the care of our service and does not serve the teams working hard to support them. That was an article by Xander Eliards.
This is from The National on Thursday, 18th April 2024, from the Culture section. Unique Lodge in Harris crowned winner of Scotland's Greatest Escape by Ross Hunter. The winner of Scotland's Greatest Escape has been announced. Beating 7 other finalists in the BBC Scotland programme, which seeks to highlight some of the best holiday accommodation the country has to offer, the Broch on the Isle of Harris emerged victorious. At the grand final, filmed in the East Nook of Fife, presenter Grado invited the 7 category finalists to a special gathering, while the Scotland's Greatest Escape judges, Fiona Campbell, Vanessa Canby, Masood Kodadadi, Zakia Mulari-Gueri, Stuart Kenny, Raj Gill and head judge Marina Huge deliberated over who should win the coveted title. Situated on the Borv Lodge estate, the Broch was created by husband and wife Adam and Cathra Kellier, who bought the estate in 2007. The building took 3 years to create and won the unique and unusual category, which kick-started the 8-week series. The couple also own Tarrant's, the UK's largest uninhabited island. "It feels completely surreal," said Cathra. "What started with an application that we didn't even think would be picked off the slush pile ended up with us winning. We can't believe it." The process kept us on our toes. To have won, well, words can't really describe it. Adam added, "It's a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief." All the other entrants were of very high calibre, and it would seem that any of them could have grabbed the top spot, so some deep humility too. He added that they believed the building's uniqueness and location helped it snatch the top prize. It's the first broch to be built in Scotland for 2,000 years. It is a unique building in one of Scotland's most exquisite landscapes. "We are proud of the service levels we can deliver, and we have an incredible team of dedicated staff who really care about getting it right with a fanatical attention to detail. And in terms of the landscapes, Harris speaks for itself. It's one of the last great wilderness areas of Europe, a true coastal paradise." Cathra said that Harris has a special place in her heart after first visiting the island during family holidays as a child. The broch stands up over Borv Valley, and everyone passing looks up to see this magnificent and extraordinary structure literally towering up, she said. But at the same time, it just blends into the landscape. "My father, originally from Lancashire, came walking here, the Isle of Arran, when he was 17 and lost his heart to the island. He brought us up here at every opportunity, and in 1985, when I was 16 years old, he bought Borv Lodge Estate. Adam and I have been coming here together ever since we met, and our 4 children have all grown up feeling very much at home here." Head Judge Huge said the broch was a worthy winner of the title. From the monumental exterior structure with its stunning architecture, influenced from Iron Age brochs, to the inspired detailing of the high-quality interiors, the overall aesthetic is faultless, she said. Geographically, the broch is an escape in every way. Harris is a very special place, home to some of the best beaches in the country and a wild, rugged coastline. The views from the broch are both spectacular and breathtaking, whatever the weather. The customer experience is exceptional, very subtle but with care and attention on each step of the customer journey. There is a clear intention to go above and beyond to deliver a tailored and unique stay that will be remembered forever. The full 8-part second series, made by Red Sky Productions for BBC Scotland, is available to view on BBC iPlayer. That article was by Ross Hunter.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.